Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, the answer company. The division championship Minnesota Twins are looking to go all the way to the World Series in 2024. Bolstered by inspirational shortstop Carlos Correa, a healthy Brian Buxton, and rookie phenom Royce Lewis, plus a pitching staff led by Pablo Lopez and an outstanding bullpen featuring Johan Duran, the Twins are the best bargain in the major leagues, and Target Field is the best venue in baseball. Sheridan Dulas & Kins, PA, a family and criminal defense law firm, has been serving clients in Dakota County and throughout Minnesota for over 40 years. Ranked a Tier 1 Best Law Firm by U.S. News and World Report every year since 2009, Sheridan Dulas & Kins are here to help you in your most difficult life circumstances. Established in 2007, 45th Parallel Spirits was among the first 50 micro-distilleries in the United States. Based in New Richmond, Wisconsin, all aspects of production occur at our facility. If you're interested in visiting and learning more about the 45th Parallel Distillery, please check our website and plan a visit to tour our facility and taste our spirits. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org.
Welcome to another episode of Access to Democracy. I'm your host, Steve Francisco. Thank you for joining us today. It's my pleasure to welcome to the studio a first-time guest. We always like first-time guests on our show.
Thanks,
Michelle Witte is the Executive Director of the League of Women Voters of Minnesota.
That's
Did I
me.
get that correct?
You got that correct. Yeah, thank you.
Pleasure to have you
Thank
here
you.
today,
Nice to be
Michelle.
here.
So I think many of our viewers have heard of the League of Women Voters. You probably have some members who are watching this program right now. Tell us, when was the League of Women Voters founded and why was it founded?
Great question. Right. Well, the League of Women Voters was actually founded in 1919, just right at 1920 when women finally passed the 19th Amendment, 72 years later of trying to get the right to vote. And after women got the right to vote, the suffragists at the time really said, you know, we didn't get the right to vote for the privilege, it was for the change we wanted to make in our communities. So they, you know, in their wisdom, set up a structure in all 50 states, which are still in existence today. We have leagues all over the state and the District of Columbia to help women at the time, but now we're open to all genders, of course, learn about civics, about government, engagement, to learn how to get elected, to register voters, and get out the vote. So that's what we've been doing for 105 years.
And how many chapters do you have right here in Minnesota?
We have 35 chapters here, and 15 of them are in Greater Minnesota. We touch almost 30.
So not just in the metro, in Greater
Right,
Minnesota.
absolutely,
too.
all over Minnesota. 2,300 dues-paying members. We're still a dues member organization. People really. It's great to have that concern in the grassroots communities, and that's really how we live out our mission.
And you are a 501c3?
Right, we're a 501c3, yep, nonprofit, but we're also nonpartisan, meaning we do not endorse or oppose any political candidate or party. But we are very political. People often get those confused, right? Meaning we do care about issues. We study issues.
You take positions on issues?
We take positions on issues that the members...
Which we're going to talk about today.
Yep. Yeah. We study them. They have to bring them to the members. Our members have to vote on it. So it's a extensive process. But then that allows us to go to the legislature and lobby, because that's really what the whole circle is, right? We vote because we care about things. And even though we take positions on issues, a lot of our positions have been around 50, 60 years. The parties change their position on the issues, and sometimes people will say, gee, you look kind of partisan. And we're like, no, the reality is, we have really two big two hats, and we do keep a really nice line between our nonpartisan voter service and what we are lobbying active on. But all of us do that,
Well,
right?
many of your issues, it would seem to me, looking online at your website, they cross party boundaries.
Absolutely.
They're really, you could describe them accurately as bipartisan interests,
Right.
if you will.
Absolutely, right.
And something you said at the outset, it's very interesting, the history of the League. I did a little reading and saw that the first time that it was proposed that women be given the right to vote was actually way back in 1878. But it took until 1920 with the ratification of the 19th Amendment that generally gave women the right to vote. But we should be very clear, as a practical matter, isn't it true it didn't really give all women the right to vote, because women of color, Native American women, others, didn't necessarily enjoy full voting rights protection in law until the passage of the Voting Rights Act, 1965.
Yes, very well said, right. It was really like 1848 in that Seneca Falls with Frederick Douglass and all these amazing people, 72 years later, right? Before that even was the 15th Amendment, which allowed black men to vote. So voting rights has always been an evolution. But to your point, in 1920 it allowed really technically all women except for Native American women who were not citizens
until
1924, as well as Asian American women. So, but it really took till 65, just like you said it beautifully. What I like to say, we often say what happened in 1920 is expanded voting rights for women. I will say though, people like Josie Johnson, our wonderful, civil rights leader here, she's like, well, we voted right away. A lot of people here, a lot of people could vote and did vote. We have had active participation from within the black community on record here in Minnesota since 1920.
But maybe not in other parts of the country.
Absolutely.
Certainly in the South, many parts of the South and the West where,
And then again, 18-year-olds, right? It used to be 21 until the Vietnam War, when then we moved from 21 to 18. So we continue to expand on our rights, and now most recently with our formerly incarcerated population being able to re-enfranchise their right to vote after they've left prison behind. So we keep growing.
And we should be clear, that's after they have served their sentences, that they have paid their debt to society. And so if we're really serious about reintegrating people into society, their rights should be restored after they've paid that debt, right? Right,
and it's part of that whole community and community building and civics that we want, right? When people are out in the community working, paying taxes, they want to feel part of the process.
That they have a stake in their community and their state and their country.
Absolutely.
Yeah, very good. So you did explain that you don't endorse candidates for office, but you do support particular issues. We're living in a time where we're seeing perhaps an unprecedented assault on our democracy. I'm talking about the institutions of our democracy, questioning the legitimacy of our elections, whether they're free and fair and accurate. What is your assessment about our state? Do we have free and fair elections in Minnesota, and are they accurate?
Well, that is a big question people bring, right? And what a lot of people don't know is all the checks and balances that are built into the system. We actually started after 2020 a whole webpage called Elections 411 that explains all the different checks and balances that are there.
And where will they find that? What's the webpage?
LWVMN.org. You will see that. And one of the things is, to your point, people will say, we need an audit of our elections. It's like, we do have an audit. We have what's called the post-election review. All 87 counties will hand count select precincts to make sure it matches with what the count was by the tabulator and, the counting from the election night. So there's lots of guardrails in place. And so we don't have to look much further than those processes to see how fair and accurate. Now, we've also had big election recounts in Minnesota, right? We had, with
Frank and Coleman,
right, was
that
a
went
big
to the
one.
Minnesota Supreme Court.
Absolutely. And all of those showed, and absolutely, errors can occur. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I was actually part of a recount when I was on the school board with our district, with one of our levy and bond referendums.
That's right. You were on the school board, or
correct.
are?
Yep,
in
I was.
South Washington County.
In South Washington County schools, and we had one where the vote no, we had a vote yes, vote no. and we won by only 18 votes, but then we had a whole, because it was close enough. Again, everyone can, there is if things are close, right? You think if there's an error here or there will be an automatic recount, but also opposing sides can ask for a recount. In this case, that's what happened. The vote no,
And
asked
doesn't the
for it.
law, in really close elections, the law provides for automatic
Absolutely,
recount
right.
when it's below what percent? Where it's-
I don't know right off
But
the
it's
bat,
very,
but it's very,
yeah,
it's very
like
generous.
within 1 or
right.
1.5 or 2% of the vote, it's an
Right.
automatic recount.
Yep.
Otherwise, if you ask for one, the campaign has to pay for that.
Right.
I want to go back, if we could, Michelle. Let's step back a second. When voters show up at their local polling place in November or any other election day, they step into a school or a church or a firehouse. Mine is at a church down here in Egan, not far away from where we're sitting. And when I come in there, I see these election workers who are there checking the roll to make sure that my wife and I are registered, which we are.
Correct, yeah.
But these are not just people of one party, are they?
No, right.
You have representation from the major political parties, both Democrat and Republican, that are checking each other's work and verification that when they give that card and that ballot to someone to mark in the voting booth, they are, in fact, eligible to vote.
Absolutely, and that's even stronger. Every day, like when we were voting in person, a Republican and Democrat, two people from opposing parties, have to open the office, double check the tabulator, then they're all working together, right? So, and then when you place your vote, when you put your little ballot in, that has to be, at the end of the day, the number of ballots given out is counted against the number of ballots that the tabulator recorded against the number of ballots that are in the box. So there's a 3-step process supervised by both parties.
This is really important, it seems to me, because we continue to hear politicians at the federal level and unfortunately sometimes at the state and local level who say, oh, there's rampant fraud going on. There are illegal immigrants coming into our polling places. There are people stuffing ballot boxes. How can that possibly be true with all of these multiple checks that are going on by both Democratic and Republican poll watchers?
Right. Well, and I always say, if you really are concerned, be an election judge, right? Every community needs election judges of both parties. So if you are really concerned, go be an election judge, because
And they
you'll
get
see for
training,
yourself.
right?
You get
And what to
training,
do
you get
that
paid,
day.
you know. And even when people talk about, the ballot boxes, or, in terms of mail-in balloting, every single ballot is uniquely tied to a voter with a barcode. We have witness signatures, et cetera. There's many, many things in place. It's unfortunate. I feel like the thing that we try to do is just continue to provide good factual information everywhere we can to try to come up against the mis and disinformation we're seeing. Sometimes people just don't want to look at that.
These myths and disinformation that are spread, they're very corrosive to our democracy. When you're undermining the institution, something as fundamental as the right to vote, you can't say you're patriotic if you just support elections that turn out the way you wanted them to.
Right,
And that when you're, I've voted plenty of times and my candidates didn't win. Other times they do.
Yeah.
But you can't really say you're patriotic if you only accept results that concur with the way you voted.
Right. Well, and that's what we hope people will see is, if you're concerned about the integrity of your election, learn more. First of all, ask the good, hard questions. Look at it. Become an election judge. Look on websites like ours. If you ask around, you'll see how well they are done. Can there be mistakes? Sure, there are.
We're human. Yeah.
Right. Those things, there are ways to deal with those kinds of things that might, perpetrate that. Also, we did have in 2018, under Republican Senator Mary Kiffmeyer, the legislative auditors actually looked at the whole system, did a deep dive, and did not find, there were maybe 5 cases that were prosecuted over extensive periods. So, again, there's been a lot. This has been looked at a lot.
And we should be very clear, candidates don't need to take your word or my word for it. We have a judicial process. If a candidate wants to go to court and challenge it, we have a judicial process that examines these and applies Minnesota election law. So this idea, though, of rampant fraud and thousands of people voting who don't have the legal right to is really a myth.
It is. It's
and
unfortunate.
In a way, it is an
Yeah.
attack on our democracy by attacking the fundamental institution of voting.
Right. I think, yeah, I mean, it's been hard. And for us, the other thing we really do is participate in the post-election review audits. In November, every single county will do this audit, and they will hand count a select number of precincts, depending on their size. We at the League of Women Voters will actually be there to observe that review, and we want to do a better job, too, of helping the community see there is a process which is open to the public. You can go and see all of these being counted by hand yourself.
Right. It's not done in a dark room hidden from public view.
So, I always say, democracy is a circle, not a line. We keep going. We just keep doing the work. It's important to keep telling, sharing the facts, telling the truth, and try to get people more involved. We've seen a lot of people change their mind once they have the information. I do believe it's important to keep the facts going.
It's interesting. I think that if you measure the strength or health of a democracy by voter participation, that's maybe one measure. Minnesota comes out quite well. We usually lead the country in voter turnout of eligible voters participating in our elections. I think personally that's an indication that we're doing well. Right. Shouldn't we want as broad a portion of the population that's eligible to participate in our elections as possible? Because if you believe in the idea of government by the consent of the governed, that's how we choose people.
Right. I think everyone would agree with that, right? But people have different ways of perceiving how well it's going. And so I think we just have to keep doing our due diligence to help people understand all of those checks and balances.
What is your reaction to the efforts in some states, and there have been some people in Minnesota who have talked about this as well, that there ought to be new restrictions, if you will, on the right to apply for an absentee vote or to vote by absentee ballot. Give us your thoughts on that. What do you think of that?
Well, remember, an absentee ballot is just a mail-in ballot, right? And we have many states, both blue and red, who have automatically or sent ballots and have mail-in ballots all the time. So it's not unusual to have mail-in ballots, and it's extraordinarily secure because of that barcode, system, and being able to, you're only mailed a ballot if your voter ID is checked out, and then you can only get it back if it adheres. So
it's not like someone says, send me an absentee ballot,
right,
and Steve Simon, the Secretary of State's office, sends a ballot. They do a check, and it's that barcode making sure that they are on the eligible voter list before they send that.
Like automatic voter registration too, right? That just started here now in Minnesota. And it's not automatic, like Secretary Simon said. It's really, it is in the sense that you will now be automatically registered to vote, and you will be given the chance to opt out if you want to.
Right.
But in reality, that your identity is always checked on the back end. And we're working really hard because one of the new myths is because that law came up against the same time as undocumented immigrants would get driver's licenses. There's people who fear that undocumented immigrants are going to be automatically registered to vote. And that is just not going to happen. We have, I actually called the state demographer's office to find out, we have almost 100,000 people in Minnesota now who, even including the secretary's mother, who is an Austrian citizen, she can't vote here, right? But she drives here. We already have people who are not citizens who drive. All of that is double checked. If you, a person who is undocumented goes to get a driver's license, if they don't need their citizenship for their driver's license, but they do need it to be registered to vote.
Which is the key
Absolutely.
point.
We all do when we first, do our license, right? We have to do our birth certificate or whatever. We also register to vote. The League of Women Voters does all our newly naturalized citizens after their ceremonies, 10, 12, 15,000 a year, which is very exciting. I mean,
usually they go to the ceremony before a federal judge.
Right,
and they
it's
take
a big deal.
The oath and get their naturalization certificate.
And then they come and register to vote. I mean, all of that is really checked, double checked. It's the same thing people will say, well, what about dead people voting? And it's like, daily the Secretary of State's office gets reports from the Minnesota Department of Health and from the Social Security Administration.
Which keeps death certificates.
Yes.
Right.
So, we really are also really trying to support and uplift our election officials. There's our 30,000 Minnesotans who serve as election judges, who are Democrats and Republicans.
I know several of them.
Yes. and our election officials who are just really great employees out there trying to do their work, and they care very much. I mean, they care about election integrity, right? And so we have a great system. It's certainly fine to ask questions, right? We advocate for people to ask good questions of their government. We don't, you know, if you're concerned, go ask the question. But what's hard to see is people not wanting to accept the answers.
Right.
They're getting, when there is so much evidence from across both sides of the aisle that our elections are fair and accurate, and there are processes in place for people who are concerned.
The late U.S. Senator Patrick Moynihan of New York, who I had the privilege of meeting a few times when I worked in Washington, he had a great saying. He used to say, "You are entitled to your opinion, your own opinion, but you are not entitled to your own facts."
Yes, well.
And I think that really is relevant to what we're talking about here, Michelle, because we have to, when this type of disinformation comes up that, oh, they're stuffing ballot boxes and all these illegal immigrants are voting and all this other stuff that is simply not true, it has to be rebutted, because one of the reasons it has to be rebutted, if you keep telling a lie often enough, people start believing it.
Right.
Some people do.
And we've been going, our local leagues, that's what's nice to have people all over the state. We've had situations in townships, especially in some of our rural townships and counties, where some of the people were sharing misinformation, and we just get right out there and share the real thing. And I'm pleased to say that most oftentimes when we bring that forward, our county commissioners look at that and go, okay, I understand.
Right.
And so it's a delicate time, but we're excited for Minnesotans to get out and start to get involved in the primaries now. First day of being able to early vote
Today,
in the primaries.
June 28th.
Yeah, our
right.
vote411.org, where people can get online and see who all the candidates are and what's on their ballot. And we just really want to encourage people to learn and participate.
Where can someone go if they're not sure what their legislative district is, voting for their state legislator, or what congressional district they live in? Because these boundaries, we should tell people if they don't know, these boundaries get redrawn every 10 years, right? Based on the results of the census, because they have to be roughly apportioned equally. But boundary lines change. We see that every 10 years. So where can people go to find out, to be sure that they're registering or trying to get registered and vote in the actual district that they live in?
Right. Well, two good things to remember: minvotes.org or minvotes.gov. I think both of them hook up to the Secretary of State's website. All of that is there. Our vote411.org also has that information. All you have to do is put in your address, and it'll tell you exactly where to vote, when to vote, what precincts you are, what's on your ballot if the ballot is up there, and what our site can do that the Secretary of State's can't do. I mean, the Secretary of State's site is great because they have so many other resources as well, but we have all the candidates. So you can look at, we invite all the candidates down to Soil and Water Board to participate, answer questions, get their information on that voter guide, statewide voter guide, which is also fully bilingual.
It occurs to me, Michelle, it's probably a good idea for all of us to check that anyway every year before we go to the polls, because just as legislative districts change, those only change once every 10 years.
Right.
But polling places can often change between elections.
Absolutely.
So the polling place that you voted in 2 years ago, it may have changed for various reasons. So it's good to double check that and be sure if you're going to go do in-person voting.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
Very good.
Easy to do.
Yeah, tell us about some of your partnerships. The League works in concert with some other nonprofit organizations. Tell us a little bit about some of those relationships and what some of the issues are that you work on with them.
Yeah, so many. Oh my goodness, we've had a lot of
And of course,
things,
I ask you that question with 5 minutes
okay,
left.
So we'll hit it. But some of the things you and I talked about, Fair Vote is a great organization working on ranked choice voting here in Minnesota. We do support ranked choice voting if in local races where, if cities and towns want that. It's a great way to get more participation from the candidates and to have that, the voter be able to, be more intentional about their interests. And so
just give a brief description. Ranked choice voting, you're voting for your first choice, and then you're maybe indicating a second choice. So if it goes to a runoff, they don't have to have another election. They simply go down until they find out who the prevailing candidate is, who the winner is.
Yeah, and so it's nice
That's
to
an
have a rank, right? You
oversimplification,
just
right?
basically rank your candidates,
Right.
but it does really help sometimes because it is difficult sometimes, right, for new candidates to get into the mix, and it also helps to sometimes reduce some of those pressures of like money in politics. We work a lot with Minnesota Clean Elections on some of those issues, Common Cause. We have great partners to our Minnesota Census Partnership with the Minnesota Council on Foundations, also working hard on both our census and redistricting. Even though it's 2030 now, we're still working hard on those kinds of partnerships. Our real goal is one person, one vote, and that every vote matters and every voice matters. That's what we're up to.
Let's circle back to that redistricting process, because there have been some conflicting views about that. Traditionally, the legislature was tasked with drawing or redrawing state legislative districts and drawing congressional districts.
Right.
But almost inevitably, every 10 years when we go through this process, one or another party or multiple parties challenge the boundaries that are drawn,
Right.
saying that, well, the way the legislature did it is gerrymandering, or they've done something we don't think is legally appropriate. So the league, as I understand it, you are supporting a proposal which would support a bipartisan
Community-based,
community-based commission
community-based, yep.
made up of people from various political points
Right.
of view that would work to redraw those districts after the census every 10 years. Do you think that that will lead to fewer challenges in the future as opposed to the regular legislative redrawing?
Well, think about it. Whoever is in power at the time the maps are drawn has an incentive to keep the map the way it was because they're there.
They
right?
want to keep their
job.
job.
So, again, we are, in essence, LWV is a good government. We're a good government agency. So we're really looking forward to say we need fair maps. And what fair maps are is having that voice, right, in terms of having that independent redistricting commission where you get the buy-in not just of the parties but also of the communities of interest. All of our communities of color, our Native American communities. What does it take to create a fair map? It takes a lot of voices of participation, and that's what we're shooting for here to try to prevent gerrymandering.
I was very excited to see, looking at your website, that the League of Women Voters is very involved with young people. We're talking about high school students and even, students a little bit younger who are maybe not yet 18 years old and entitled to vote, but they will be.
Right.
And the legislature passed some legislation this session to make it easier for 18-year-olds to become registered. They also passed a provision for pre-registration for 16 and 17-year-olds. Tell us, if you would, just in a moment, how does that work?
Right. So what is so great is we know that 18 to 24-year-olds, as a general population rule, have been voting 20 points less than the average. But when they are registered, they're voting way over 90%.
Participation.
So we want to get them registered. And part of getting involved, part of the civics bill, too, that like Representative Erdahl and others helped pass in 11th to 12th grade, is to marry those together. You're going to learn about civics, but let's get you engaged. Let's get those 16 and 17-year-olds ready so that when they hit 18, they're ready to vote. And we're doing a big initiative with both the DFL, GOP, Secretary of State for National Voter Registration Day on September 17th. We hope all of our high schools will go to our website and sign up to participate, because this is a big year. Kids are interested. They are interested. They just have a lot going on, right? So we want to help give them the tools to get over that hurdle and get out and participate.
That's very exciting for a number of reasons, but one of which, this is the next generation that comes after us.
Absolutely.
And preserving Minnesota's tradition of having robust participation, leading the nation in voter turnout, is really exciting.
Yeah.
Michelle Witte, Executive Director of the League of Women Voters of Minnesota, thank you for coming on Access to Democracy.
Thanks for having me.
Telling us about your great organization and the great work that you and your staff and your members do all over Minnesota and supporting and strengthening our democracy. Thank you very much.
Thanks. It was great to be here. Take care.